My name is John Bonjour. I am a comic artist and film enthusiast, and a few weeks ago, my wife and I were scrolling through Netflix, and we happened upon the Russo brothers' most recent film. As a person who is uniquely interested in the Russo brothers' career, because I think it has been just insane what they've chosen to do and the way that they've chosen to do it, I decided I really should see The Electric State. And let me say, I have not stopped thinking about this film since the credits started rolling, and I don't mean that in a good way at all. It brought up a question that's been sitting in the back of my mind for years, something that's been slowly nagging at me, eating away at my brain. What the hell happened to CGI characters? In this video, I want to take some time and address the timeline of animated characters in live-action movies. And I do have some specific criteria because I want to see how we got to Electric State, not just how we got to CGI being an important thing. So my criteria for what I am calling animated ensemble casts is that we have characters that are either hand-drawn or CGI interacting with the real world that we live in, the one that we're in. I think that there's an interesting and kind of haunting trajectory that I want to highlight, not just for animated characters, but for film and art overall, that I think is important to talk about. That said, I am not going to be talking about every example that you can possibly think of animated characters and live action people interacting with each other. There are too many, and I don't have time, and some of them don't matter at all. Some of them don't matter. There's a lot of things that fit within the trajectory, and I'm going to highlight specific key moments in the timeline. So, if I don't mention your favorite thing that you really love and think I should have talked about, it's because I hate you. Let's get started. In 1940, Friz Furlong directed the animated live-action hybrid short, You Ought to Be in Pictures. This is a Looney Tunes live-action short where Porky Pig and I believe Daffy Duck decide that they want to be in the movies. They decide that they're going to actually go to Hollywood and be movie stars. Obviously, classic Looney Tunes hijinks ensue. There are a few notable things that I want to mention about this. It is not technically the first example of this, but I do think it's quite possibly the first example of this with words, and it's also very, very likely the first example of the live-action animated hybrid thing, where it's clearly intentionally trying to have fun with that idea, have this combination of these two worlds in ways that feel not dissonant, but complementary. So there are moments where the characters are interacting with real life things that are going on, and moments where the real world kind of reflects the animated version of the Looney Tunes world. There's specifically, notably, there's a fight between the two main characters, and we see it in real world, and they move into a different room, and chairs and papers are flying around, but real chairs, real papers are being thrown out in the way that it would happen in a cartoon. But it's a very fun reflection, a fun tying together of the physicality and the animation that I think works overall really, really well. As a reminder, this came out in 1940, which is insane. If you watch this short, it does not feel at all like that. It feels way ahead of its time, way stronger than it should, and I think the most important piece of that is the cast. The short is headlined by Leon Schlesinger, the guy who produced the majority of the Looney Tunes cartoons in perpetuity forever from the beginning of time, and Mel Blanc, the guy who has voiced Bugs Bunny for just about as long. And I think that's important. The focus on this is not ooh, ah, look at the stars. Focus of the film is watching these animated characters interact with the real world. And we'll get to how that all happened, but it is important to note that that is the core fun of this movie, is that it is live-action Looney Tunes and kind of nothing else. To be fair, was that probably because of budget? Absolutely. If they had had the opportunity to have any number of A-list stars in this film, I have no doubt that they would jump at it. But the fact that they didn't is, I think, a key pivotal reason for why it works. This movie feels like a magic trick. And in a lot of ways, it feels like a magic trick, in the sense that, again, coming out in 1940, this is early on in this development process, but it also has not ironed out the rough edges. There are still parts of this, parts of when a character will say, pick up Porky Pig's car and throw it out into the street, that it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel cohesive. And this is not a dig at the movie. This is not shade being thrown at the movie, because I can't stress this enough. 1940. I couldn't make this now, all right? So I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm saying this is one of the earliest examples of someone trying to capture this magic that we all kind of think could be there. but it's not the best example. The best example, and I'm sure all of you knew this going into it, is 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, directed by Robert Zemeckis. This is a detective noir story set in a world where real life and cartoons just interact all the time. They are in the same world, existing in the same space. There are very interesting class dynamics at play that they play with a little bit, but at its heart, this is a very silly, very fun murder mystery, and I adore this movie. That is not a hot take. Everyone adores this movie because it is so effective. Where You Ought to Be in Pictures feels like a magic trick, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is magic. There is something about this movie, the way that the characters interact with real life objects, the way real characters interact with the animated characters, it feels physical. It feels real. It feels like they filmed animated characters in the real world. It makes it feel like Roger Rabbit is a real human rabbit man, a real being that you could go and see and would have aged since then. That said, given the bigger budget, the bigger scope, this also has a bigger cast. We're talking Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, and the thing that, once again, I think is so important, Charles Fleischer, the other guy who has voiced Bugs Bunny for a lot of the cartoons and a lot of the movies. This is a movie that deals with the dissonance between cartoons and real world in a way that is so much fun. It plays on both of them in ways that sometimes the real world is sillier than the cartoons, and sometimes the cartoons are darker than the real world. It has fun with the characters, it has fun with the story, it has fun with the world in ways that reflect that it is, at its core, a live-action cartoon. That is something that I think is so fundamentally important, and something that sets the trajectory for the overall timeline of these animated ensemble cast movies for a really long time. By numbers, the majority of these films are cartoons in real world. That is the general idea. And if Who Framed Roger Rabbit is the call, the response has to be Space Jam. Yes, we got things in between like Cool World and Evil Toons. How could we not when you see something as fully fleshed out, as fully cohesive as Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Of course, the world is gonna light on fire for more of that kind of magic. But I don't think the hearts of people, children specifically, were captured in the same way until Space Jam came around. There are two fundamental developments to the trajectory of the animated ensemble cast movie that I think are notable from Space Jam. Number one, the animated portions of the film are a mix of hand-drawn and CGI. And number two, this might be the original and best example of stunt casting. Stunt casting is a thing where you cast an A-list celebrity in a movie just because they're an A-list celebrity. And in this case, it's specifically notable because it's Michael Jordan playing Michael Jordan. The main selling point of the film is Michael Jordan at the peak of his fame, and Looney Tunes also very famous. Maybe not the peak of their fame, but very famous. That said, while the focus is on Michael Jordan, he is still surrounded by actual voice actors playing actual characters. I'm gonna read down the list. Billy West as Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, D. Bradley Baker as Daffy Duck and the Tasmanian Devil. Did I say Daffy Duck earlier? Did I say the other duck? I don't know. Bob Bergen as Birdie, Hubie, and Marvin the Martian. Bill Farmer as Sylvester, Yosemite Sam, and Foghorn Leghorn. June Foray as Granny. Maurice LaMarche as Pepe Le Pew. Kath Soucie as Lola Bunny. And the list goes on. They are surrounded by actual voice actors doing actual voice acting, bringing these cartoon characters to life, which is, I'll said it before and I'll say it again, vitally important to this kind of thing working. Space Jam doesn't work if you don't acknowledge that it's a silly-ass idea, because it is a silly-ass idea. And the key to making a thing like Space Jam work is that you lean into the silly. A thing, while I didn't love it, that I think Space Jam: A New Legacy also does quite well is leaning into the silly. You have characters going into all these different Warner Brothers properties, all the Warner Brothers properties coming to them. There's an inherent silliness to the movie that I think is worth noting, although they also cast Zendaya as Lola Bunny. This trend of kid-focused films with either CGI or hand-drawn animated characters, mostly cartoon characters, mostly IP-related cartoon characters, coming into the real world and interacting with these people, would continue on for a very long time. And it's one of the main branches off of this timeline that I think is worth noting because it kind of becomes its own subgenre with things like Stuart Little, Stuart Little 2, Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, Garfield, Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Alvin and the Chipmunks: The Squeakquel, Alvin and the Chipmunks: Chipwrecked, Alvin and the Chipmunks: The Road Chip, and Lyle Lyle Crocodile. In a lot of senses, this is the final accomplishment of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We've gotten to the point where we can come out with Paddington, Paddington 2, Paddington in Peru, things where a CGI character can be wholesome, wholehearted, sweet, genuine, non-distracting, interacting with the world. And I think we should have stopped there. In fact, I would even argue we were relatively close to stopping there. But then something changed pretty dramatically. In 2001, Year of Our Lord, Peter Jackson released The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And the world was taken by storm for a lot of reasons, one of which being Andy Serkis's Gollum. And it's hard to remember in this moment that Andy Serkis didn't used to be a household name. He used to be just kind of a guy. And while I don't think that the Lord of the Rings movies fit the animated ensemble cast genre, I do think it's worth noting that Andy Serkis becoming a household name because of all of the freaky shit that he did as Gollum is important. And it could have been wonderful. This is the first example of a voice actor or a motion capture actor being caught up in the storm, becoming an A-list, becoming someone that we recognize, that we know, that we go to, that we rely on for this kind of thing. This is what it should have been. Peter Jackson knew that the only person who could make Gollum feel real, feel tangible and expressive in this world, especially with this new emerging technology of motion capture, was a person who was so deeply steeped in it that it was their entire being. He knew to go to the person who was so aware of the technology, so aware of the limitations, the restraints, the benefits, the pros, what they were able to capture, that he could create something, craft something so intrinsically real that you never questioned it for a second. And obviously there's a lot of other things that go into that. The Weta effects making it look real, the incredible CGI, all the things that go into making that feel real are beyond Andy Serkis. But I think everyone realized, everyone clicked in for a moment to the fact that there is an art to doing this. Suddenly, CGI characters were more than just a gimmick. They were a viable option for just characters, just people in a movie could be CGI. And for a second, it looked like that might be a really good thing. Now we'll jump to the year 2007 with Michael Bay's Transformers, starring Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox as our two human protagonists, and Peter Cullen and Hugo Weaving as our main robot boys, our big metal guys. This is a split-off point for Hollywood. This is the moment that unfortunately I think we realize we can just have Hugo Weaving be a robot and people will like it. And that is a shame because Peter Cullen is the man who has voiced Optimus Prime for decades, for years. He is the voice of Optimus Prime, and they knew going into the movie that we have to get the voice of Optimus Prime, which is good. That's the right call. Unfortunately, they also made what I consider to be the wrong call, which is just casting Hugo Weaving. And it's nothing against Hugo Weaving. I want to make that clear as we start getting into this section of the video. Casting A-list celebrities is not a bad thing. There's a reason that they're A-lists. A lot of them are very, very good actors. The problem is, casting Hugo Weaving does not a Megatron make. There is no reason specifically to cast him as Megatron. He does a decent job. He is a solid Megatron. There's no getting around that. But they also add a lot of like weird robot sounds and tinny voice modulators. So a lot of people could have been Megatron. It's this thing where I'm highlighting this specific moment as the transition point because this is where we start to realize, okay, anyone can do anything. We don't need voice actors, or in this case, we don't need motion capture actors to specifically be these characters, to specifically be any of these people, because A, the technology is getting good enough that we can either just animate it ourselves or have anyone do the motion capture, and we have enough nodes and geodes or whatever the hell they use to figure out how to capture that performance on their own. And B, they're realizing that they can cast A-list celebrities as these characters and people will still want to see them. People won't stop taking these seriously. People won't stop giving them money just because they cast regular celebrities. And unfortunately, this is a hugely important decision for the future of film, for the future of subgenre, for the future of the careers of voice actors that Michael Bay could not have possibly known the weight of. My man just wanted to make a big, dumb robot blockbuster, and he crushed that. Unfortunately, the repercussions are long-lasting and I think potentially detrimental to the idea of an animated ensemble cast movie. He unknowingly set the course directly away from craftsmanship and right toward the iceberg of stunt casting. That said, the course took a while to fully take over. In the meantime, we had movies like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, and I would argue possibly the last bastion of this kind of casting where it is A-list celebrities, but there is also potentially a purpose: the Marvel movies. I don't think you can make a video like this without talking about the fact that Vincent Diesel himself plays a tree man with 3 words of dialogue, and they paid him for that. I don't think you can make a video like this without talking about the fact that Bradley Cooper plays a raccoon in those movies, or Josh Brolin plays a big purple man who likes rocks. I don't think you can not address the fact that there is a lot of A-list casting in these large, huge budget movies, a lot of which have CGI characters played by these A-listers. But I do think it's worth noting that this is not inherently stunt casting. Josh Brolin was chosen for Thanos because he had the timbre and the presence of Thanos. Bradley Cooper was chosen to be Rocket Raccoon because he was able to bring something emotional to Rocket Raccoon. I think you cannot watch the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and remember that it's Bradley Cooper without actively trying to do that. You're sucked into the world in the motion capture, yes, but the vocal performance is bringing something. Bradley Cooper is doing a character. He is becoming Rocket Raccoon, and I think that is critically important to those movies working. The only outlier I can think of is Korg, played by Taika Waititi, which he did not feel like an outlier when Ragnarok came out. But it's only when people were aware that it was him already that they started to be frustrated by it being him. As it stood when Ragnarok came out, it was a fun Easter egg that the director of the movie was the big rock guy. This is the other branch in the timeline, movies that do have A-list actors playing animated characters, voicing animated characters for an actual purpose, something that means something. They were chosen for a reason. And that's unfortunately a branch off because that's not the direction that a lot of these other films have taken, and it's not the direction that leads us to the electric state. I promise we're getting there, but we can't quite get to the electric state just yet because there are a few more developments that need to happen in the timeline. First and foremost, the canary in the coal mine, the beginning of the end, Pokemon Detective Pikachu. In this movie, nothing means anything, death is inevitable, and Pikachu, the Pokemon with arguably the most recognizable vocal cues, just sounds like Ryan Reynolds now. Sure, there's story reasons that they give for him having a different voice or having a human-sounding voice, but that doesn't justify the fact that Ryan Reynolds is doing nothing. He's not chosen because Ryan Reynolds would be a good Pikachu. In fact, I think it's the exact opposite. Part of the movie's point is that it is dissonant and strange that Pikachu sounds like Ryan Reynolds, but it never explains that in any resolution kind of way. It just has enough story to justify casting Ryan Reynolds so you can have him go do the press tours and say Ryan Reynolds is in your movie. And it's a huge bummer because I think a lot of this movie works really, really well. I think a lot of this is very fun and a love letter to Pokemon and Pokemon fans. But then there's this strange stink of corporatized, forced, required A-list celebrity that doesn't make any sense within the film. This could have been the revolution for voice actors to finally come back into play and be important again, and instead, they cast Deadpool. This is where we start to see the end draw near for the animated ensemble cast. This is where the shiny veneer starts to lose its luster, where the cracks start to show. And there's one very big crack. Before we get to the predecessor of the electric state, I want to highlight a quick note on stunt casting and check back in on a franchise that has been rebooted a couple of times, soft rebooted twice, I think, and then hard rebooted into, granted, an animated movie, but also granted, an animated movie, and that's Transformers 1. Transformers 1 was announced as an animated restart to the Transformers universe, and by all accounts, from everything I've heard, it's very good and you should probably watch it. But I find it hugely frustrating. The way that they've stacked this cast with A-list celebrities is not only disrespectful to actual voice actors who put in the craft to make this happen, but also kind of disrespectful to Transformers because it takes it away from being a Transformers movie to being a Transformers movie starring Chris Hemsworth, Brian Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael Key, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Fishburne, and Jon Hamm. Why the hell are all of those people in a Transformers animated movie? We have brilliant voice actors doing really good work in things that are below their pay grade, things that are not good enough to deserve that kind of thing, and you're gonna give millions of dollars to an animated Transformers movie. You're gonna put it in theaters. You cast Chris Hemsworth as Optimus Prime? He can be a great actor. He is a great actor. He can do a lot of wonderful voices, but that's not the point. We should be giving opportunity to these people that have mastered the craft, especially in an animated movie, but also in a live action movie with a lot of CGI cast, which brings me to the predecessor of The Electric State, the second to worst of these kinds of movies in my heart, If, directed by John Krasinski. Now, just to be clear, I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with the film If. I think it's a very serviceable dramedy for kids. I think it's directed fairly well. I think Ryan Reynolds does an okay job in it. He does an all right job in it. Everyone does an okay job. The problem with the film is that every time there's an emotional beat, anytime there's something powerful happening or something important going on screen, a side character will say something, and I'm immediately drawn out of the movie by trying to figure out, where do I know that voice from? I know that's somebody. And I'm very likely right that I recognize that actor because it could be anyone from this list of Amy Schumer, Maya Rudolph, Sam Rockwell, Blake Lively, Keegan-Michael Key again, Bill Hader, Matt Damon, Bradley Cooper, George Clooney, Emily Blunt, and Awkwafina. What are we doing? This is a movie that could be good. It's a cute idea, it's a creative concept, and every time I hear someone say any line of dialogue, I am immediately drop-kicked out of the movie and reminded by a curb stomp to the head that Bill Hader plays a banana. Which brings us to, finally, The Electric State from 2025. This year, the year I am currently making the video, the Russo brothers have put out the biggest budget, worst movie I've ever seen in my life. And there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of issues with this movie. But one of the major ones is, once again, every animated character is just a random guy you know. Let me read down this list of A-list celebrities in The Electric State. Alan Tudyk, Coleman Domingo, Hank Azaria, Jenny Slate, Brian Cox, Anthony Mackie, Woody Harrelson, Stanley Tucci, Giancarlo Esposito, Jason Alexander, Ke Quan, and then as our two human protagonists, Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown. Once again, it is not wrong to cast A-list celebrities, but why did Woody Harrelson need to be Mr. Peanut? What is he bringing that makes it worth paying for Woody Harrelson when you could be supporting and paying an actor that has deserved the right to be in this kind of movie? Actually, that's not true. Has deserved the right to be in the good version of this kind of movie. It is an adaptation of a really good dystopian book with brilliant imagery and beautiful illustration, and in a very fitting tonal way, the movie, the adaptation, has stripped all of the art, all of the substance, all of the story out of the concept, and has instead just plastered over it with neat looking imagery. It is so upsetting to live in a world where something that looks as interesting and good as this does, at least in terms of visual imagery, and it is as empty and vapid and soulless as it is. It's so frustrating to watch this movie. It's so frustrating to exist in a world where that is coming out. That is the entertainment. A movie that physically tells you every emotional beat you're supposed to see or feel, that looks dead in the camera and says, gosh, I sure am sad about my brother. I sure do miss my brother. If only I could find my brother. Children's movies are not stupid. They don't have to be stupid. And Not to mention, and this is just becoming a rant on the electric state now, this could have been something interesting, and it doesn't even totally know if it wants to be. It is partially fun action adventure kids movie and partially horrific nightmare fuel. This dystopian wasteland where everyone is addicted to technology and technology is the only thing with a heart. It is almost an idea, but it never plays. It never works. All of the story goes in different directions and it never comes back together. All of the characters have motivations that are too clear, too obvious, and too easily solved. We're presented a world of misinformation and none of that is ever capitalized on. Nothing in this movie makes any use of any of the ideas that it has. The focus was so intrinsically locked on stripping away any creative craftsmanship that might have been given by voice actors and focusing on managing this giant cast of A-list stars that they forgot to make a movie with any depth whatsoever. There is nothing in this movie outside of some cool imagery, and even that gets a little thin. There's nothing in this movie that feels like it has deserved any of my attention, much less $320 million. $320 million, not accounting for inflation. That is in the top, I think, 10 highest budget movies ever, which is psychotic. This is not a movie that should be made for $320 million. This isn't a movie that should be made at all if you're not going to focus on the characters and telling a good story and making a good movie. This feels like a calculated choice by the Russo brothers to get as many popular people in their movie so that your best chance of having a bunch of people be like, oh, I like Chris Pratt, I like Millie Bobby Brown, I like Ke-Huy Quan, I'm gonna go see this movie. Not even go see this movie. And I can't even begin to get started on what I think about streaming and how stupid it is as a concept. I wouldn't be upset if I didn't care. I wouldn't be upset if I didn't think there was the potential for these kinds of movies to be good. The technology is there. You can make a thing that feels real and is completely fake. And that should be amazing. That should be incredible. And every once in a while we get a flash of what it could be. The Avatar movies, the Planet of the Apes films, hell, even The Thing from the Fantastic Four is a good example of, granted, a higher level celebrity, at least now with the bear, but casting someone that is willing to do a character, make something out of this character, and bring something to the role. It is so frustrating to see that they're just constantly throwing away money at these things that don't have any art, don't have any intention behind them, and also devalue voice acting to the point that anyone can play anything and it doesn't even matter. It makes me so sad to the voice actors out there who just want to do their craft that they've worked so hard at and are relegated to DC animated movies, not that there's anything wrong with that, or straight to DVD animated movies again, not that there's anything wrong with that. To the people that just want to make their craft important again and make it something that they own and are able to do, I only have one thing to say: you ought to be in pictures. Thank you so much for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on movies, comics, TV shows, anything of the like, hit the like button and the subscribe and comment down below what you want me to review next, or do none of those things because I am not your dad.